What possible ideas do you have for how human species ends?
Sure. So I think the most obvious way to me is wireheading. We end up amusing ourselves to death. We end up all staring at that infinite TikTok and forgetting to eat. Maybe it's even more benign than this. Maybe we all just stop reproducing. Now, to be fair, it's probably hard to get all of humanity.
Yeah. The interesting thing about humanity is the diversity in it.
Oh, yeah.
Organisms in general. There's a lot of weirdos out there.
Well,
2 of them are sitting here.
I mean, diversity in humanity is...
With due respect.
I wish I was more weird.
You mentioned something in a stream about the philosophical nature of time. So let's start with a wild question. Do you think time is an illusion?
You know, I sell phone calls to Comma for $1,000.
Yeah.
And some guy called me and it's $1,000. You can talk to me for half an hour. And he's like, yeah, okay. So like time doesn't exist. And I really wanted to share this with you. I'm like, oh, what do you mean time doesn't exist, right? Like, I think time is a useful model, whether it exists or not, right? Like, does quantum physics exist? Well, it doesn't matter. It's about whether it's a useful model to describe reality. Is time maybe compressive?
Do you think there is an objective reality, or is everything just useful models? Like underneath it all, is there an actual thing that we're constructing models for?
I don't know.
I was hoping you would know.
I don't think it matters.
I mean, this kind of connects to the models of constructive reality with machine learning, right?
Sure.
Like, is it just nice to have useful approximations of the world such that we can do something with it?
So there are things that are real. Coulomb-Graph complexity is real.
Yeah.
Yeah. The compressive math is real. Yeah.
Should be a t-shirt.
And I think hard things are actually hard. I don't think P equals NP.
Ooh, strong words.
Well, I think that's the majority. I do think factoring is in P, but...
I don't think you're the person that follows the majority in all walks of life, so but it's good.
For that one, I do.
Yeah. In theoretical computer science, you're one of the sheep. All right. But to you, time is a useful model.
Sure.
What were you talking about on the stream with time? Are you made of time?
If I remembered half the things I said on stream, someday someone's going to make a model of all of it, and it's going to come back to haunt me.
Someday soon?
Yeah, probably.
Would that be exciting to you or sad that there's a Geohotz model?
I mean, the question is when the Geohotz model is better than Geohotz. Like, I am declining and the model is growing. So
what is the metric by which you measure better or worse in that? If you're competing with yourself?
Maybe you can just play a game where you have the Geohotz answer and the Geohotz model answer and ask which people prefer.
People close to you or strangers?
Either one. It will hurt more when it's people close to me, but both will be overtaken by the Geohotz model.
It'd be quite painful, right? Loved ones, family members would rather have the model over for Thanksgiving than you.
Yeah.
Or like significant others would rather sext with the large language model version of you.
Especially when it's fine-tuned to their preferences.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing in a relationship, right? We're just fine-tuning ourselves, but we're inefficient with it because we're selfish and greedy and so on. Our language models can fine-tune more efficiently, more selflessly.
There's a Star Trek Voyager episode where, Catherine Janeway, lost in the Delta Quadrant, makes herself a lover on the holodeck.
Mm-hmm.
And the lover falls asleep on her arm and he snores a little bit. And, Janeway edits the program to remove that. And then, of course, the realization is, wait, this person's terrible. It is actually all their nuances and quirks and slight annoyances that make this relationship worthwhile. But I don't think we're going to realize that until it's too late.
Well, I think a large language model could incorporate the flaws and the quirks and all that kind of stuff.
Just the perfect amount of quirks and flaws to make you charming without crossing the line.
Yeah. And that's probably a good approximation of the percent of time the language model should be cranky or an asshole.
Yeah.
or jealous or all this kind of stuff.
And of course it can and it will, but all that difficulty at that point is artificial. There's no more real difficulty.
Okay, what's the difference between real and artificial?
Artificial difficulty is difficulty that's like constructed or could be turned off with a knob.
Mhm.
Real difficulty is like you're in the woods and you got to survive.
So if something cannot be turned off with a knob, it's real.
Yeah, I think so. Or, I mean, you can't get out of this by smashing the knob with a hammer. I mean, maybe you kind of can, Into the Wild when, Alexander Supertramp, he wants to explore something that's never been explored before. But it's the 90s, everything's been explored. So he's like, well, I'm just not going to bring a map.
Yeah.
I mean, no, you're not exploring. You should have brought a map, dude. You died. There was a bridge a mile from where you were camping.
How does that connect to the metaphor of the knob?
By not bringing the map, you didn't become an explorer. You just smashed the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The difficulty is still artificial.
You failed before you started. What if we just don't have access to the knob?
Well, that maybe is even scarier, right? Like we already exist in a world of nature, and nature has been fine-tuned over billions of years.
Yeah.
To have humans build something and then throw the knob away in some grand romantic gesture is horrifying.
Do you think of us humans as individuals that are like born and die? Or are we just all part of one living organism that is Earth, that is nature?
I don't think there's a clear line there. I think it's all kind of just fuzzy. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm conscious. I don't think I'm anything. I think I'm just a computer program.
So it's all computation. The thing running in your head is just is computation.
Everything running in the universe is computation, I think. I believe the extended church-tiring thesis.
Yeah, but there seems to be an embodiment to your particular computation. Like there's a consistency.
Well, yeah, but I mean, models have consistency too.
Yeah.
Models that have been RLHF'd will continually say, well, how do I murder ethnic minorities? Oh, well, I can't let you do that, Hal. There's a consistency to that behavior.
It's all RLHF. Like we all RLHF each other. We provide human feedback, and thereby fine-tune these little pockets of computation. But it's still unclear why that pocket of computation stays with you, like for years. It just kind of like you have this consistent set of physics, biology, whatever you call the neurons firing. Like the electrical signals, the mechanical signals, all of that seems to stay there. And it contains information, it stores information, and that information permeates through time and stays with you. There's like memory. It's like sticky.
Okay, to be fair, like a lot of the models we're building today are even RLHF is nowhere near as complex as the human loss function.
Reinforcement learning with human feedback.
When I talked about will GPT-12 be AGI, my answer is no, of course not. I mean, cross-entropy loss is never going to get you there. You need probably RL in fancy environments in order to get something that would be considered like AGI-like. So to ask like the question about like why, I don't know, like it's just some quirk of evolution, right? I don't think there's anything particularly special about where I ended up, where humans ended up.
So, okay, we have human level intelligence. Would you call that AGI? Whatever we have? GI?
Look, I don't really even like the word AGI, but general intelligence is defined to be whatever humans have.
Okay. So why can GPT-12 not get us to AGI? Can we just like linger on that?
If your loss function is categorical cross-entropy, if your loss function is just try to maximize compression, I have a SoundCloud, I rap, and I tried to get ChatGPT to help me write raps.
Mm-hmm.
And the raps that it wrote sounded like YouTube comment raps. You can go on any rap beat online and you can see what people put in the comments. And it's the most like mid-quality rap you can find.
Is mid good or bad?
Mid is bad.
Mid is
It's
bad.
like mid. It's like...
Every time I talk to you, I learn new words. Mid.
Mid, yeah.
I was like, is it like basic? Is that what mid means?
Kind of. It's like middle of the curve, right?
Yeah.
So there's that intelligence curve,
Yeah.
and you have like the dumb guy, the smart guy, and then the mid guy. And
Yeah.
actually, being the mid guy is the worst. The smart guy is like, I put all my money in Bitcoin. The mid guy is like, you can't put money in Bitcoin. It's not real money.
And all of it is a genius meme. That's another interesting one. Memes, the humor, the idea, the absurdity encapsulated in a single image. And it just kind of propagates virally between all of our brains. I didn't get much sleep last night, so I'm very, I sound like I'm high, but I swear I'm not. Do you think we have ideas or ideas have us?
I think that we're going to get super scary memes once the AIs actually are superhuman.
Ooh,
Like
you
the-
think AI will generate memes?
Of course.
You think it'll make humans laugh?
I think it's worse than that. So, Infinite Jest, it's introduced in the first 50 pages, is about a tape that you, once you watch it once, you only ever want to watch that tape. In fact, you want to watch the tape so much that someone says, okay, here's a hacksaw, cut off your pinky, and then I'll let you watch the tape again, and you'll do it. So we're actually going to build that, I think. But it's not going to be one static tape. I think the human brain is too complex to be stuck in one static tape like that. If you look at like ant brains, maybe they can be stuck on a static tape. But we're going to build that using generative models. We're going to build the TikTok that you actually can't look away from.
So TikTok is already pretty close there, but the generation is done by humans.
Yeah.
The algorithm is just doing their recommendation, but if the algorithm is also able to do the generation,
well, it's a question about how much intelligence is behind it, right?
Mhm.
So the content is being generated by, let's say, one humanity worth of intelligence, and you can quantify a humanity, right? That's a, it's exaflops, yottaflops, but you can quantify it. Once that generation is being done by 100 humanities, you're done.
so it's actually scale that's the problem, but also speed. Yeah. And what if it's sort of manipulating the very limited human dopamine engine? So porn. Imagine just TikTok, but for porn.
Yeah.
It's like a Brave New World.
I don't even know what it'll look like, right? Like, again, you can't imagine the behaviors of something smarter than you, but a super intelligent and an agent that just dominates your intelligence so much will be able to completely manipulate you.
Is it possible that it won't really manipulate? It'll just move past us. It'll just kind of exist the way water exists or the air exists.
You see, and that's the whole AI safety thing. It's not the machine that's going to do that. It's other humans using the machine that are going to do that to you.
Yeah. Because the machine is not interested in hurting humans. It's just,
The machine is a machine,
yeah.
but the human gets the machine. And there's a lot of humans out there very interested in manipulating you.
Well, let me bring up Eliezer Yudkowsky, who recently sat where you're sitting. He thinks that AI will almost surely kill everyone. Do you agree with him or not?
Yes, but maybe for a different reason.
Okay. And then I'll try to get you to find hope, or we could find a no to that answer. But why yes?
Okay, why didn't nuclear weapons kill everyone?
That's a good question.
I think there's an answer. I think it's actually very hard to deploy nuclear weapons tactically.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to accomplish tactical objectives. Great, I can nuke their country. I have an irradiated pile of rubble. I don't want that.
Why not?
Why don't I want an irradiated pile of rubble?
Yeah.
For all the reasons no one wants an irradiated pile of rubble.
Oh, because you can't use that land for resources. You can't populate the land.
Yeah. Well, what you want, a total victory in a war, is not usually the irradiation and eradication of the people there. It's the subjugation and domination of the people.
Okay. So you can't use it strategically, tactically in a war.
Yeah.
To help you, to help gain a military advantage. It's all complete destruction. All right.
Yeah.
But there's egos involved. It's still surprising. Still surprising that nobody pressed the big red button.
It's somewhat surprising, but you see, it's the little red button that's going to be pressed with AI that's going to, and that's why we die. It's not because the AI, if there's anything in the nature of AI, it's just the nature of humanity.
What's the algorithm behind the little red button? What possible ideas do you have for how human species ends?
Sure. So I think the most obvious way to me is wireheading. We end up amusing ourselves to death. We end up all staring at that infinite TikTok and forgetting to eat. Maybe it's even more benign than this. Maybe we all just stop reproducing. Now, to be fair, it's probably hard to get all of humanity.
Yeah.
It probably
There's always like the interesting thing about humanity is the diversity in it.
Oh yeah.
Organisms in general. There's a lot of weirdos out there.
Well,
2 of them are sitting here.
I mean, diversity in humanity is...
With due respect.
I wish I was more weird. No, like I'm drinking smart water, man. That's like a Coca-Cola product, right?
You went corporate, Geohotz.
I went corporate. No, the amount of diversity in humanity, I think, is decreasing. Just like all the other biodiversity on the planet.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Right?
Social media is not helping, huh?
Go eat McDonald's in China.
Yeah. All right, let's, before we go to company number 3 and company number 4, let's go to company number 2.
All right.
TinyCorp. Possibly one of the greatest names of all time for a company. You've launched a new company called TinyCorp that leads the development of Tinygrad. What's the origin story of TinyCorp and Tinygrad?
I started Tinygrad as a toy project just to teach myself, okay, like what is a convolution? What are all these options you can pass to them? What is the derivative of a convolution, right? Very similar to Karpathy wrote Micrograd. Very similar. And then I started thinking about like AI chips. I started thinking about chips that run AI, and I was like, well, okay, this is going to be a really big problem. If NVIDIA becomes a monopoly here, how long before NVIDIA is nationalized?
So you, one of the reasons to start TinyCorp is to challenge NVIDIA.
It's not so much to challenge NVIDIA. I like NVIDIA, and it's to make sure power stays decentralized.
Yeah. And here it's computational power. And to you, NVIDIA is kind of locking down the computational power of the world.
If NVIDIA becomes just like 10x better than everything else, you're giving a big advantage to somebody who can secure NVIDIA as a resource.
Yeah.
In fact, if Jensen watches this podcast, he may want to consider this. He may want to consider making sure his company is not nationalized.
Do you think that's an actual threat?
Oh, yes.
No, but there's so much, there's AMD.
So we have NVIDIA and AMD. Great.
All right. But you don't think there's like a push towards like selling, like Google selling TPUs or something like this? You don't think there's a push for that?
Have you seen it? Google loves to rent you TPUs.
It doesn't. You can't buy it at Best Buy?
No. So I started work on a chip. I was like, okay, what's it going to take to make a chip? And my first notions were all completely wrong about like how you could improve on GPUs. And I will take this. This is from Jim Keller on your podcast. And this is one of my absolute favorite descriptions of computation. So there's 3 kinds of computation paradigms that are common in the world today. There's CPUs. And CPUs can do everything. CPUs can do add and multiply. They can do load and store. And they can do compare and branch. And when I say they can do these things, they can do them all fast, right? So compare and branch are unique to CPUs. And what I mean by they can do them fast is they can do things like branch prediction and speculative execution. And they spend tons of transistors and these like super deep reorder buffers in order to make these things fast. Then you have a simpler computation model, GPUs. GPUs can't really do compare and branch. I mean, they can, but it's horrendously slow. But GPUs can do arbitrary load and store, right? GPUs can do things like X dereference Y. So they can fetch from arbitrary pieces of memory. They can fetch from memory that is defined by the contents of the data. The third model of computation is DSPs. And DSPs are just add and multiply, right? Like they can do load and stores, but only static load and stores. Only loads and stores that are known before the program runs. And you look at neural networks today, and 95% of neural networks are all the DSP paradigm. They are just statically scheduled adds and multiplies. So Tinygrad really took this idea and I'm still working on it to extend this as far as possible. Every stage of the stack has Turing completeness. Right? Python has Turing completeness, and then we take Python, we go into C++, which is Turing complete, and maybe C++ calls into some CUDA kernels, which are Turing complete. The CUDA kernels go through LLVM, which is Turing complete, into PTX, which is Turing complete, into SAS, which is Turing complete, on a Turing complete processor. I want to get Turing completeness out of the stack entirely. Because once you get rid of Turing completeness, you can reason about things. Rice's theorem and the halting problem do not apply to Admol machines.
Okay. What's the power and the value of getting Turing completeness out of, are we talking about the hardware or the software?
Every layer of the stack.
Every layer.
Every layer of the stack, removing Turing completeness allows you to reason about things, right? So the reason you need to do branch prediction in a CPU, and the reason it's prediction, and the branch predictors are, I think they're like 99% on CPUs. Why do they get 1% of them wrong? Well, they get 1% wrong because you can't know, right? That's the halting problem. It's equivalent to the halting problem to say whether a branch is going to be taken or not. I can show that. But the Admol machine, the neural network, runs the identical compute every time. The only thing that changes is the data. So when you realize this, you think about, okay, how can we build a computer and how can we build a stack that takes maximal advantage of this idea? So what makes Tinygrad different from other neural network libraries is it does not have a primitive operator even for matrix multiplication. Right? And this is every single one. They even have primitive operators for things like convolutions.
So no matmul.
No matmul. Well, here's what a matmul is. So I'll use my hands to talk here. So if you think about a cube, and I put my two matrices that I'm multiplying on two faces of the cube, right? You can think about the matrix multiply as, okay, the n cubed, I'm going to multiply for each one in the cubed. And then I'm going to do a sum, which is a reduce up to here to the third face of the cube. And that's your multiplied matrix. So what a matrix multiply is a bunch of shape operations, right? A bunch of permutes, reshapes, and expands on the two matrices. A multiply, n cubed. A reduce, n cubed, which gives you an n squared matrix.
Okay, so what is the minimum number of operations that can accomplish that if you don't have matmul as a primitive?
So Tinygrad has about 20. And you can compare Tinygrad's opset or IR to things like XLA or primtorch. So XLA and primtorch are ideas where like, okay, Torch has like 2,000 different kernels. PyTorch 2.0 introduced primtorch, which has only 250. Tinygrad has order of magnitude 25. It's 10x less than XLA or primtorch. And you can think about it as kind of like RISC versus CISC, right? These other things are CISC-like systems. Tinygrad is RISC.
And RISC won.
RISC architecture is going to change everything. Okay. 1995, hackers.
Wait, really? That's an actual thing?
Angelina Jolie delivers the line, RISC architecture is going to change everything in 1995.
Wow.
And here we are with ARM in the phones. And ARM everywhere.
Wow. I love it when movies actually have real things in them.
Right?
What about like the developer experience with Tinygrad? What it feels like? What are the versus PyTorch?
By the way, I really like PyTorch. I think that it's actually a very good piece of software. I think that they've made a few different trade-offs, and these different trade-offs are where, Tinygrad takes a different path. One of the biggest differences is it's really easy to see the kernels that are actually being sent to the GPU, right? If you run PyTorch on the GPU, you like do some operation and you don't know what kernels ran. You don't know how many kernels ran. You don't know how many flops were used. You don't know how much memory accesses were used. Tinygrad type debug equals 2. And it will show you in this beautiful style every kernel that's run. How many flops and how many bytes.
So can you just linger on what problem Tinygrad solves?
Tinygrad solves the problem of porting new ML accelerators quickly. One of the reasons, tons of these companies now, I think Sequoia marked GraphCore to 0, right? Cerebus, TensTorrent, Grok, all of these ML accelerator companies, they built chips. The chips were good. The software was terrible. And part of the reason is because I think the same problem is happening with Dojo. It's really, really hard to write a PyTorch port because you have to write 250 kernels and you have to tune them all for performance.
What is Jim? Jim Keller think about Tinygrad? You guys hung out quite a bit, so he's he was involved. He's involved with
Sure.
TenStorrent. What's his praise and what's his criticism of what you're doing with your life?
Look, my prediction for TenStorrent is that they're going to pivot to making RISC-V chips. CPUs.
CPUs. Why?
Because AI accelerators are a software problem, not really a hardware problem.
Oh, interesting. So you don't think you think the diversity of AI accelerators in the hardware space is not going to be a thing that exists long term?
I think what's going to happen is if I can finish. Okay, if you're trying to make an AI accelerator, you better have the capability of writing a torch level performance stack on NVIDIA GPUs. If you can't write a torch stack on NVIDIA GPUs, and I mean all the way, I mean down to the driver, there's no way you're going to be able to write it on your chip because your chip's worse than an NVIDIA GPU. The first version of the chip you tape out, it's definitely worse.
Oh, you're saying writing that stack is really tough.
Yes. And not only that, actually, the chip that you tape out, almost always because you're trying to get advantage over NVIDIA, you're specializing the hardware more. It's always harder to write software for more specialized hardware. Like a GPU is pretty generic. And if you can't write an NVIDIA stack, there's no way you can write a stack for your chip. So my approach with Tinygrad is first write a performant NVIDIA stack. We're targeting AMD.
So you did say a few to NVIDIA a little bit. With love.
With love.
Yeah.
With love.
So
it's like the Yankees, you know? I'm a Mets fan.
Oh, you're a Mets fan. A risk fan and a Mets fan. What's the hope that AMD has? I mean, you did a build with AMD recently that I saw. How does the 7900 XTX compare to the RTX 4090 or 4080?
Well, let's start with the fact that the 7900 XTX kernel drivers don't work. And if you run demo apps in loops, it panics the kernel.
Okay. So this is a software issue.
Lisa Su responded to my email.
Oh.
I reached out. I was like, this is, really?
Yeah.
Like, I understand if your 7x7 transposed Winograd conv is slower than NVIDIA's, but literally when I run demo apps in a loop, the kernel panics.
So just adding that loop.
Yeah, I just literally took their demo apps and wrote like while true, do the app, done in a bunch of screens.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is like the most primitive fuzz testing.
Why do you think that is? They're just not seeing a market in machine learning?
They're changing. They're trying to change. And I had a pretty positive interaction with them this week. Last week, I went on YouTube. I was just like, that's it. I give up on AMD. Like, this is their driver doesn't even, like, I'm not gonna, I'll go with Intel GPUs. Right? Intel GPUs have better drivers.
So you're kind of spearheading the diversification of GPUs.
Yeah, and I'd like to extend that diversification to everything. I'd like to diversify my central thesis about the world is there's things that centralize power and they're bad. And there's things that decentralize power and they're good. Everything I can do to help decentralize power, I'd like to do.
So you're really worried about the centralization of NVIDIA. That's interesting. And you don't have a fundamental hope for the proliferation of ASICs, except in the cloud.
I'd like to help them with software. No, actually, the only ASIC that is remotely successful is Google's TPU.
Yeah.
And the only reason that's successful is because Google wrote a machine learning framework. I think that you have to write a competitive machine learning framework in order to be able to build an ASIC.
You think Meta with PyTorch builds a competitor?
I hope so.
Okay.
They have one. They have an internal one.
Internal. I mean, public facing with a nice cloud interface and so on.
I don't want a cloud.
You don't like cloud?
I don't like cloud.
What do you think is a fundamental limitation of cloud?
Fundamental limitation of cloud is who owns the off switch.
So it's power to the people.
Yeah.
And you don't like the man to have all the power.
Exactly.
All right. I mean, that's kind of like what the whole like cryptocurrency is trying, like that. I think crypto is just carrying the flame of that spirit of like stuff should be decentralized.
It's just such a shame that they all got rich.
Yeah.
If you took all the money out of crypto, it would have been a beautiful place.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, these people, they sucked all the value out of it and took it.
Yeah, money kind of corrupts the mind somehow. It becomes a drug. And
you corrupted all of crypto. You had coins worth billions of dollars that had zero use.
Yeah. You still have hope for crypto?
Sure. I have hope for the ideas. I really do. Yeah. I mean, I want the US dollar to collapse. I do.
What do you think are the chances? What do you think in general that Llama was open sourced? I just did a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg, and he's all in on open source.
Who would have thought that Mark Zuckerberg would be the good guy? No, I mean it.
Who would have thought anything in this world? It's hard to know. But open source to you ultimately is a good thing here.
Undoubtedly. What's ironic about all these AI safety people is they are going to build the exact thing they fear. We need to have one model that we control and align. This is the only way you end up paperclipped. There's no way you end up paperclipped if everybody has an AI.
So open sourcing is the way to fight the paperclip maximizer.
Absolutely. It's the only way. You think you're going to control it? You're not going to control it.
So the criticism you have for the AI safety folks is that there's a belief and a desire for control.
Yeah.
And that belief and desire for centralized control of dangerous AI systems is not good.
Sam Altman won't tell you that GPT-4 has 220 billion parameters and is a 16-way mixture model with 8 sets of weights.
Who did you have to murder to get that information? All right.
I mean,
but yes.
Everyone at OpenAI knows what I just said was true, right? Yeah. Now, ask the question, really. It upsets me when like GPT-2, when OpenAI came out with GPT-2 and raised a whole fake AI safety thing about that. I mean, now the model is laughable. Like they used AI safety to hype up their company, and it's disgusting.
Have you talked to Andrej Karpathy, or have you talked to Elon about TinyCorp를?
He went to work at OpenAI.
What do you love about Andrej Karpathy? To me, he's one of the truly special humans we got.
Oh man, his streams are just a level of quality so far beyond mine. I can't help myself. It's just.
Yeah, he's good.
He wants to teach you.
Yeah.
I want to show you that I'm smarter than you.
Yeah, he has no. Thank you for the sort of honest, the raw, authentic honesty.
Yeah.
A lot of us have that. I think Andre is as legit as it gets in that he just wants to teach you, and there's a curiosity that just drives him, and just like at the stage where he is in life, to be still like one of the best tinkerers in the world.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like to what is it? Micrograd?
Micrograd was inspiration for Tinygrad. The whole, his CS 231N was the inspiration. This is what I just took and ran with and ended up writing this. So,
But to me, that
don't go work for Darth Vader, man.
The flip side to me is that the fact that he's going there is a good sign for OpenAI.
Maybe.
I think I like Ilya Sutskever a lot. I like those guys are really good at what they do.
I know they are. And that's kind of what's even more. And you know what? It's not that OpenAI doesn't open source the weights of GPT-4. Mm-hmm. It's that they go in front of Congress. And that is what upsets me. We had 2 effective altruist Sams go in front of Congress. One's in jail.
I think you're drawing parallels on there.
One's in jail.
You give me a look. Give me a look.
No, I think effective altruism is a terribly evil ideology, and
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's something about a thing that sounds pretty good that kind of gets us into trouble?
Because you get Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried is the embodiment of effective altruism. Utilitarianism is an abhorrent ideology. Well, yeah, we're going to kill those 3 people to save 1,000, of course.
Yeah.
Right? There's no underlying, there's just, yeah.
Yeah, but to me, that's a bit surprising. But it's also, in retrospect, not that surprising. But I haven't heard really clear kind of, rigorous analysis why effective altruism is flawed.
Oh, well, I think charity is bad, right? So what is charity but investment that you don't expect to have a return on, right?
Yeah, but you can also think of charity as is you would like to see So allocate resources in an optimal way to make a better world.
And probably almost always that involves starting a company.
Yeah.
Right? Because
it's more efficient.
Yeah. If you just take the money and you spend it on malaria nets, okay, great. You've made 100 malaria nets. But if you teach...
Yeah. A man how to fish.
Right? Yeah.
No, but the problem is teaching a man how to fish might be harder. Starting a company might be harder than allocating money that you already have.
I like the flip side of effective altruism, effective accelerationism. I think accelerationism is the only thing that's ever lifted people out of poverty. The fact that food is cheap. Not we're giving food away because we are kind-hearted people. Mm-hmm. No, food is cheap. And that's the world you want to live in. UBI, what a scary idea. What a scary idea. All your power now? Your money is power? Your only source of power is granted to you by the goodwill of the government? Mm. What a scary idea.
So you even think long-term? Even...
I'd rather die than need UBI to survive, and I mean it.
What if survival is basically guaranteed? What if our life becomes so good?
You can make survival guaranteed without UBI. What you have to do is make housing and food dirt cheap. Sure. Right? And that's the good world. And actually, let's go into what we should really be making dirt cheap, which is energy. Yeah. Right? That energy, oh my God, that's, if there's one, I'm pretty centrist politically. If there's one political position I cannot stand, it's deceleration. It's people who believe we should use less energy.
Yeah.
Not people who believe global warming is a problem. I agree with you. Not people who believe that, saving the environment is good. I agree with you. But people who think we should use less energy, that energy usage is a moral bad. No. Yeah. No, you are diminishing humanity.
Yeah, energy is flourishing. Of creative flourishing of the human species.
How do we make more of it? How do we make it clean? And how do we make just how do I pay 20 cents for a megawatt hour instead of a kilowatt hour?
Part of me wishes that Elon went into nuclear fusion versus Twitter. Part of me. Or somebody like Elon.
We need to I wish there were more Elons in the world. And I think Elon sees it as this is a political battle that needed to be fought. And again, I always ask the question of whenever I disagree with him, I remind myself that he's a billionaire and I'm not. So, maybe he's got something figured out that I don't, or maybe he doesn't.
To have some humility. But at the same time, me as a person who happens to know him, I find myself in that same position. And sometimes even billionaires need friends who disagree and help them grow. And that's a difficult reality.
And it must be so hard. It must be so hard to meet people once you get to that point where...
Mm-hmm. Fame, power, money, everybody's sucking up to you.
See, I love not having shit. I don't have shit, man. Trust me, there's nothing I can give you. There's nothing worth taking from me,
Yeah, it takes a really special human being when you have power, when you have fame, when you have money, to still think from first principles. Not all the adoration you get towards you, all the admiration, all the people saying yes, yes, yes.
And all the hate, too.
And the hate.
I think that's worse.
So the hate makes you want to go to the yes people because the hate exhausts you. And the kind of hate that Elon's gotten from the left is pretty intense. And so that, of course, drives him right. And loses balance. And
it keeps this absolutely fake, psyop political divide alive so that the 1% can keep power.
I wish we'd be less divided because it is giving power.
It gives power
to the ultra powerful.
I know.
The rich get richer. You have love in your life. Has love made you a better or a worse programmer? Do you keep productivity metrics?
No. No, I'm not that. I'm not that methodical. I think that there comes to a point where if it's no longer visceral, I just can't enjoy it. I still viscerally love programming. The minute I started
So that's one of the big loves of your life is programming.
Oh, I mean, just my computer in general. I mean, I tell my girlfriend my first love is my computer, of course. right? Like, I sleep with my computer. It's there for a lot of my sexual experiences. Like, come on, so is everyone's, right? Like, you got to be real about that. And like,
not just like the IDE for programming, just the entirety of the computational machine.
The fact that, yeah, I mean, it's, I wish it was, and someday they'll be smarter, and someday, maybe I'm weird for this, but I don't discriminate, man. I'm not going to discriminate BioStack life and Silicon Stack life. Like,
so the moment the computer starts to say like, I miss you, and starts to have some of the basics of human intimacy, it's over for you. The moment VS Code says, hey, George.
No, you see, no, but VS Code is, no, they're just doing that. Microsoft's doing that to try to get me hooked on it. I'll see through it. It's gold digger, man. It's gold digger.
Look at me an open source.
Well, this gets more interesting, right? Yeah. If it's open source, and yeah, it becomes.
Though Microsoft's done a pretty good job on that.
Oh, absolutely. No. Look, I think Microsoft, again, I wouldn't count on it to be true forever, but I think right now Microsoft is doing the best work in the programming world. Like between GitHub Actions, VS Code, the improvements to Python, it works Microsoft. Like this is
who would have thought Microsoft and Mark Zuckerberg are spearheading the open source movement.
Right. How things change.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, by the way, that's who I'd bet on to replace Google, by the way.
Who?
Microsoft.
I
think Satya Nadella said straight up, I'm coming for it.
Interesting. So your bet, who wins AGI?
I don't know about AGI. I think we're a long way away from that. But I would not be surprised if in the next 5 years, Bing overtakes Google as a search engine.
Interesting.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Interesting. I hope some startup does.
It might be some startup too. I would equally bet on some startup.
Yeah, I'm like 50-50.
Yeah.
But maybe that's naive.
Yeah.
I believe in the power of these language models.
Satya's alive. Microsoft's alive.
Yeah. It's great. I like all the innovation in these companies. They're not being stale.
Yeah.
And to the degree they're being stale, they're losing. So there's a huge incentive to do a lot of exciting work and open source work, which is this is incredible.
Only way to win.
So I was recruited to say some words of inspiration on the topic of AI agents. So I actually wanted to begin with a story. I think like AI agents are near and dear to my heart to some extent because this is a story from very early OpenAI, back when it was like maybe a dozen people. And this was 2016 or so, and the zeitgeist of the day actually were RL agents. And so everyone was really interested in building agents, but very much at the time it was in the context of games primarily. So it was the height of excitement around Atari and all the game playing and so on. And so my project at OpenAI was trying to focus the RL agents not on games, on Montezuma's Revenge and so on, but on using computers, using keyboard and mouse. And so I wanted to make them useful, I wanted to make them do lots of tasks. And this project was called World of Bits. And I worked on it together with Tim Shi and Jim Fan. They're somewhere here, I think I saw them. And so the three of us ended up publishing a paper. It's not a super amazing paper, because basically at the time, all you had as a hammer was reinforcement learning. And so we had these very simple web pages, and we were trying to like order a flight or order something to eat in very simple web pages. And we were mashing buttons and mouse clicks and so on, and we were trying to like stumble our way into higher rewards, and obviously it didn't work. So the technology was just not ready, and that was not the right thing to work on at the time. And so it turns out that the right thing to do at the time was actually to forget about AI agents altogether and start building language models. And then language models, now we're back here 5 years later. I got distracted with self-driving for a bit there. But it looks like AI agents are cool again. But the toolkit has changed completely. And so the way you would approach these problems today is completely different. In fact, all of you are working on AI agents, but you're not using any reinforcement learning probably. And so that's so crazy. And I don't think we would have anticipated it at the time. It's just the way this played out is very interesting. So I want to spend a bit of time on like, okay, what is causing all this hype? I think obviously the reason that all of you are interested in this topic is that I think it's very obvious to a lot of people that AGI will take the form factor of some kind of an AI agent. And it's not just going to be a single agent, maybe there's going to be many agents. Maybe they're going to be in organizations or civilizations of digital entities. And I think it's just extremely inspiring to sort of like think through. It's kind of crazy. I also want to pour some water on it too, though. I think there is a large class of problems that I think are very easy to imagine, very easy to build demos for, but are actually extremely hard to make products out of. And I think many things fall into this category. I would say self-driving is an example of it, actually. Self-driving is very easy to imagine, very easy to build a demo of a car driving around the block, but making it into a product takes a decade. And the same is true, I think, for example, VR, very easy to imagine, build demos, but getting it to work, again, takes a decade. And I think agents are kind of like that as well. Very easy to imagine, get excited about, build demos off, but I think if you're in it, you should be in it for a decade and actually make it work. One other thing I wanted to say is that I think it's kind of interesting to go back to neuroscience now and take inspiration from it again in some ways. I think this was true in the early days of deep learning, but it's now true also again for AI agents. So it's been kind of interesting for me to think about sort of all the equivalents. So in particular, I think a lot of us, when we're, it's clear that language models is part of the solution, but how do you build an entire digital entity that has all of the cognitive tools that humans have? So obviously we all think we need some kind of a potential system to actually like plan ahead and think through and reflect on what we're doing. And there's a lot more that you can take inspiration from. So for example, the hippocampus is important. What is the equivalent of the hippocampus for AI agents? Well, it's somehow like recording memory traces and maybe indexing them using embeddings and retrieving from them, something like that. So maybe that's kind of like the retrieval kind of thing in the brain. We, I think, understand how to build visual auditory cortex roughly, but there's many still things that are like, what are the equivalents of them in AI agents? What is the basal ganglia doing? What does it look like in an AI agent? What is the thalamus doing? The thalamus sort of integrates all this information together. It's kind of like potentially the seat of consciousness, and it's got this very interesting neural circuit where if you think of your brain as sort of like multiple entities fighting for the microphone as to like what you're going to do, the thalamus is probably where that happens. It's kind of interesting. So I actually brought a book that I like in neuroscience. It's called Brain and Behavior by David Eagleman. And I find this very interesting and inspirational, so I'll leave it here if you'd like to go through it and page through it. And I just think that there's some interesting inspiration to, again, draw from neuroscience, just like we did early on with respect to how we design an individual neuron, we can do that again today. Maybe. Finally, I wanted to end with some words of inspiration. What's interesting and not obvious is that you guys building AI agents are actually at the forefront of capability of AI agent today. And all the big labs, like LLM labs, like OpenAI and DeepMind and so on, I suspect are not at the edge of the capability. You are at the forefront of it. So OpenAI, for example, is very good at training massive transformer language models. So as an example, one way to put it is, if a paper comes out that proposes some different way of training a transformer, the internal Slack at OpenAI is something along the lines of, oh yeah, someone tried that 2.5 years ago, and here's what happened, and here's why it didn't work. And it's very well understood and very well mapped out. But when a new agent paper comes out, we're all interested, and we look at it, and we're like, oh, that's really cool, that's novel. And that's because, the team didn't have like 5 years to spend on it, and it's competing now with all of you, and the entrepreneurs and hackers and so on. It's really hard to do. So, yeah, I think it's really inspiring that you are at the edge of capability, and on something that is obviously very important and transformational. And so with those words, I think I'm eager to see what you guys build.